Welcome, everyone. We are really excited. I'm Allison, and we're really excited to have you join us for our third Vintage Hollywood Go Campaign virtual tasting. We have two couples today, but before I get to introduce them, I just want to give you a little background about what we're doing. Vintage Hollywood is an annual wine and food event that we've been doing for 19 years, and unfortunately, the circumstances had to cancel it this year. And so we've invited some of our wineries to join us for these wonderful virtual tastings, which is actually a really special opportunity because at a walk around event, you get to taste all the great wines and maybe say hi to them, but you don't always get to hear their stories. And what's really great about knowing their stories is it builds a personal connection and sort of an affinity towards wine. So I know some of you know Wayne and Kara already, and some might know Peter and Rebecca, who've come to Vintage Hollywood for years. But maybe you'll learn something new today, and maybe you'll actually meet a new winemaker and want to try some wines after this. Before I give a formal introduction, I want to introduce Kristen Bennett from Go Campaign. Go Campaign is our benefactor, or the charity that we have selected with Vintage Hollywood, and Kristen can tell you a little bit about what Go Campaign does.
Great, thank you, Allison. So thank you everyone for joining us today for charity. It means a lot to us. We really appreciate it. The Go and Go campaign actually stands for Giving Opportunity to Children. So today, just by sipping with us, you're going to be giving opportunity to children throughout the world, primarily though with Vintage Hollywood throughout Southern California. So basically what we do is we improve the lives of vulnerable children around the world by partnering with local heroes to deliver local solutions. And what your funds will be doing today, especially, are going towards COVID-19 relief and also going towards addressing racial inequalities in communities throughout Southern California. So thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to have you all get what's in store for you and have a great time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. So just a couple reminders. If you can keep yourself muted if you're not one of our winemakers. And if you have any questions or any comments, throw them into the Zoom chat, and I will integrate them in, and we'll have you pop off when we to speak to the winemakers when there's an opportunity. Without further ado, what I thought was really cool about pairing these two groups together, these two partners together, is that there's similarity, that we've got two couples here. Both of them started in New York, and both of them made their way out west to California to make wine. Peter and Rebecca work from Ampelos Cellars, ended up in Santa Barbara County and the Santa Rita Hills. And you've got Wayne and Kara Fingerman, who ended up in Napa Valley with Hard Six Cellars. So I thought it might be fun to start out with them introducing their wineries and giving you a little overview of kind of how they ended up moving from New York to the West Coast. So Peter and Rebecca, if you want to start and introduce everyone to Ampelos.
Sure, we'd love to do that. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Go. Thank you so much to Allison for putting this together. This is awesome. I know that's a difficult time right now where we can't be together as we usually are here in early July down in Hollywood. So we have to do it in a different way. And I also want to thank you so much to all your participants for supporting this wonderful event. It is great that you're willing to help out to the fantastic purposes that Vintage Hollywood is always part of. We've done it for, I think, almost a decade by now. We're always very honored to be part of it. So sorry if it's a little bit dark on the face now. We have an umbrella and we've got a new one. It's a little bit dark. We want to have a white one. So all kind of excuses. But I'm Peter Work, Rebecca Work here. My wonderful wife is sitting next to me. And I'll just give you a little quick rundown of our background. Many years of corporate IT, had a dream of one day having a vineyard, didn't quite know why, except for that we got very inspired by Robert Mondavi's book, The Harvest of Joy, and we thought it would be cool one day if we could start realizing the dream. So in '99, Rebecca and I, we bought what you're looking at behind me here, which is our wonderful 82-acre piece of property. There was nothing but raw land when we bought it.
And the intent was, we thought 5 acres, isn't that romantic, having your dogs running through it? It was just going to be a hobby. And then what happened is we flew into New York on 9/11 because we were working in New York for a company. And at that minute, or at that point in time, Peter was supposed to be at the World Trade Center, but at the last minute, they canceled the meeting. And so on our way back, we said, do we want to go to our house in Long Beach or back to the ranch up here in Santa Barbara? And we decided to come up here to Santa Barbara. And at that point in time, we decided to quit our corporate jobs and trust that we could learn to make wine.
So in 2001, we planted the first initial 25 acres on our property. We are located about 45 minutes northwest of Santa Barbara in Santa Ynez Valley, in the western end of that, in what later became the Santa Rita Hills appellation. That's what we are looking at here right behind us. We initially planted mostly with Pinot Noir, about 2/3 Pinot Noir in initially 2 different kinds of Pinot Noir, 2 different clones.
But because I'm a Syrah lover and he had to keep me happy, we planted Syrah as well.
So today we expanded a little bit in 04 and in 13. So today we have about 25 acres planted, about 40,000 vines in the ground. After our second harvest in 2005, we decided to chase the most ultimate farming that we could do to get the grapes as good as possible. So Rebecca and I converted our ranch to organic farming and to biodynamic farming, went through a 3-year conversion process and got certified in 09. And furthermore, in 08, we went through on a pilot program, an initial project for sustainability certification, SIP, sustainability in practice, got certified in 08. So with that, our vineyard you're looking at behind us is the first vineyard in the United States to be organic, biodynamic, and sustainable certified in all 3 disciplines. That's pretty much from a farming aspect, the rundown of that. Back to you, Allison.
Thank you. Well, that's a great introduction, which is going to lead me to a few questions. But let's jump over to Wayne and Kara, and maybe you can tell us how you guys ended up from New York over on the West Coast.
I apologize if we cut out, because once or twice now has cut out. So please let us know if we freeze or cut out. But I too would like to thank the Go campaign for the great work they do. Kara and I participated in a great event last year, and we hope next year to be able to do a planned event that we have in Newport Beach to support Go, which was scheduled for this August and unfortunately canceled. Our story's a little different. Kara and I were coming out pretty frequently to go to a friend's vineyard harvest party and visit them frequently, a place called V Madrone. And one of those visits out here, I started to think about potentially buying a property where we could make a little bit of hobby wine and kind of maybe have as a retirement place and slowly transition to a life out here. I found a property in a place called Tennessee Ridge.
I think did we lose them?
Their video is not on.
Yeah.
They may not have a good connection.
Yeah, the joy of sitting in the vineyard is we don't get the best connections. Okay, there, Wayne's back there.
Okay, so I purchased a property on Hennessy Ridge that had planted acre to Cabernet, and Karen and I were just going to make a little bit of wine. Our timetable accelerated somewhat. We decided to pack up the dogs, drive west, and move out here full time. Once we got out here, we got the bug. We found property where we're sitting on Diamond Mountain and a vineyard out in Frost Sea, planted Syrah, and that we really hoped to make varietals we were particularly passionate about, and we plant some Chardonnay and Pinot out at the coast. Have Cabernet here and an alternate style of Cabernet from their aspect. So while we don't practice biodynamic or organic farming, it would have been difficult because the vines were established. And what we discovered in trying to transition them to a more sustainable way of farming was we were losing a lot of
I'm going to, I don't know if Wayne can hear me or if he dropped out altogether, but hopefully they're going to move up to their house to get better service. And we will jump back to them. Wayne, I think we need you to go back to your house because the connection is really bad.
Okay, sorry. We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to let Wayne jump back in, but Peter, I want to jump back, and this is going to be the next question I would ask both is the name that you both came up with. So if you could tell everyone where the name Ampelos Cellars comes from, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed that Peter is the Danish cowboy, that's his nickname up in the Central Valley. So.
Exactly, that's why I speak funny. But I gotta interrupt and do something else first because we gotta have some wine in our glasses here. We just went out with some friends and had a lunch in Los here, and we definitely need to add a little bit of wine to that. I'm sure everybody is out there got some wine in their glasses, so why don't we say cheers to everybody out there. Cheers to you, Alison. Thanks to go.
So Ampelos means vine in Greek, and the reason for the name is twofold. Everything about our wines are all about the vineyard. It's kind of my husband's and my job not to mess it up when we bring in the fruit. But it's also, the other reason is Peter and I were married in Greece, and we have a bed and breakfast in Greece, and therefore that's the connection to that whole Greek name, Ampelos.
Yeah, and if you
So
ever...
it's a Greek. Go ahead.
If you ever have the chance, any of you, to travel to Greece one day in the future when we're allowed to go back to Europe, it's a wonderful little island that I got to visit a couple of years ago. His sister has the property. She's married to a Greek man, and he's an artist. I'm wearing his ring that I bought there, actually, in honor of that.
Oh, that's so funny. That is awesome. Thank you. I'll tell you that when I see them next time. When I talk to them next time via Zoom. That's a great story.
So I know that we're still waiting for Wayne. Let's just jump in because people are thirsty. And I know that some of you have the Ampelos wines. Some of you have the Hard Six wines. I don't know if you're opening all your wines today, and you're not obligated to, but we're going to start with a little white wine. It is a hot Sunday afternoon. And I know that Hard Six has a Sauvignon Blanc, which I'll let them talk about when they come back here. But in the meantime, Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about Viognier?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened for us is that in the mid-90s, we were together with some friends out in Redlands, and they opened up a bottle of this grape I've never heard about before. It was called Viognier. It was a bottle from a producer named QP that we didn't know much about. Well, we know Bob Lindquist and Louisa. We actually sell grapes to them today. So we tasted this Viognier, and we're like, oh my God, this tastes so darn good. So when Rebecca and I planted the vineyard here, we said, let's make a little bit of Viognier. The problem with Viognier is there's not a lot of it.
Especially because my husband and I are not big Chardonnay lovers. And so Viognier tends to be anything but Chardonnay.
And it's a very interesting grape to work with. It is typically from the northern Rhone. So at some point in time, it was almost extinct. It existed in the areas of Condrieu and Châteaubriand pretty much only. And then at some point in time, different people, especially John, brought some grapes, some cuttings over here, and really John Alban established this Viognier presence in the United States that have now expanded. There's a lot of it around, nothing compared to Chardonnay, of course, but it's a great grape that really expresses some fantastic flavors. What we learned with Viognier is all the wet white grapes starts tasting like some kind of apples once they start turning colors, and then they go through their citrus stages. But the Viognier will then turn into these peach apricot flavors. And once the grapes turn to those flavors, then we pick the grapes the next day.
But that only happens is if it's in a cool climate. If it's in a hot climate, which a lot of Viogniers come from, then it's very flowery. And a lot of people are turned off by Viognier because they tend to be overflowered. But if you get a cool weather Viognier, you're not going to find that.
And it just has these great flavors when we bring them in. This one is from 2 vineyards, from our own vineyard right here behind us. And it's the only wine we make where we buy a little bit of grapes because we only have 237 plants, 1 row of Viognier. So we have to supplement it. We're buying from a wonderful little vineyard up in Lisa's Canyon that's called Martian Vineyard, which is also certified organic and biodynamic. We bring the grapes in, press them out, and once it's pressed out, we do it pretty much right after they're picked. We put in a tank, let it settle, put into another tank, and let it slowly start fermentation. All our wines are natural wines, so it means we don't add yeast to it. We just let nature's own yeast that's on the grapes when we pick them do the fermentation for us. And the other thing
And we
is,
actually keep the fermentation really cool. So at 55 degrees, where most fermentations are in the high 80s. And the reason we do that is so none of the fruit is burned off.
so we retain those beautiful esters. So some of those stone fruit flavors, they stay in the wine. It stays in steel. We don't put this in oak, and the wine was bottled up in January. So this 2019 beer, when you think about it, it was just picked about 3 or 4 months before it was bottled. So that's how we make this. We make only about 300 cases.
It has a really nice mouthfeel and some nice acidity, which makes it a really food-friendly wine. I'm sorry for those who don't have it, but maybe you'll have a little inspiration to try it. Viognier is one of those grapes that a lot of people think of as floral and kind of flabby, flat, and not great on the palate. But when you have acidity, it's all the different. We have Wayne and Kara back. So Wayne, I'm going to let you continue your story, and then if you can also talk a little bit about where the name Hard Six Cellars comes from.
Sorry about that, everybody. We're not the most technologically savvy people in the world, and we did test the vineyard connection, and it worked. But apparently we need some additional help from IT at Pensera Securities. Little plug there, George. There you go. So as I was saying, we moved out and ahead of schedule, purchased that small vineyard with the intent of just making a little bit of hobby wine. Found these other vineyards in Appalachians we really appreciated and where we could produce things that we were passionate about. I won't go too much into the farming practices because they're dramatically different in each site. The Sauvignon Blanc is sourced. The Syrah comes from Fort Ross Seaview, and again, we were hoping to have some Pinot and Chard from out there. We did a replant out there with the intent of being completely sustainable, no spray, very limited irrigation. And the issue we had there was that there is a lot of mildew pressure. So it became a struggle to kind of proceed 100% the way we wanted, but we're very appreciative of what the works do in biodynamic and organic and sustainable farming. It's just not 100% achievable here on our site. So we do the best we can, no pesticides. We spray a little bit of sulfur for mildew pressure, irrigate more than we'd like when it's particularly warm. Generally speaking, as sustainable as we could be given the sites we have. The Hard Six name, you want the long version or the short version?
Read the audience now. Give us the medium version.
Medium version. Any Battlestar Galactica fans out there? Admiral Adama. Nothing? Okay, my middle name is Adam. Kara and I were particularly drunk one afternoon, trying to come up with a clever.
I think it was at least at night. I don't think it was me.
No, it was a Sunday afternoon. We were trying to come up with something clever because Fingerman Family Vineyards isn't exactly a real enticing name. So Kara came up with Adama. Adama in Hebrew is earth, terroir. There was already an Adama Vineyards in Israel. We didn't want to get into a licensing battle. She Googles Adama, Admiral Adama. Admiral Adama comes up, his big statement. Somebody please mute.
It's working.
Oh, sorry about that. Admiral Adama often said, sometimes you got to roll the hard six. In other words, go for broke. So it turns out that's
It works.
Turns out that's what we're doing. So Hard Six Cellars,
Not so funny anymore.
Hard Six, urban slang for high risk, high reward. We turned it into our risk, your reward. That's our tagline on it.
I love it. So here we have two wineries, and you missed just what Peter and Rebecca, they named it Ampelos, meaning vine in Greek, but also it's an island where they have a little bed and breakfast that his sister has in Greece. So it's nice to see two wineries that didn't take their kind of family names, which is what a lot of wineries do, and really put a name on your winery that means something to you personally. And those on the inside get the joke now. So can you briefly tell us about your Sauvignon Blanc, and then we'll move into reds and talking about some other things. But we talked about the Viognier very briefly, and just thought for those that have your wines and have white wine open, they might want to hear a little bit about your wine.
Yeah, so we felt the need really to, even though we don't grow any white grapes, we felt the need to have a white to offer to our clients. So we found a vineyard to our liking on the east side of Napa, and have been sourcing the fruit there. The first vintage from there was 2012, which we actually never had a label on because we weren't officially a winery. So we kind of gave it to people. People really appreciated it. A very dense Sauvignon Blanc. The fruit is extremely rich for an SB. Does not present like a traditional SB. There might even be some other things mixed in the vineyard. What we did for years was something called batonnage. So what we did was we pressed the whole clusters off immediately into barrel, and through fermentation, we stirred the juice with the lees in neutral barrels, gave it a little bit of richness. This vintage was the first time we actually went a little bit leaner. We were trying to go for something a little more French in style. So what we did was we fermented it in tank to about 13 bricks and then transferred it to the barrels for the batonnage. So it's a little more minerally, a little less dense than years past. It's my favorite of the Sauv Blancs that we've produced to date. This was all supposed to be a placeholder until we get the Chardonnay up and running off the coast.
I think it has a really nice texture. It's got a lot of acidity, but it also kind of coats the palate with this nice softness that that's quite tasty. Two really nice white wines. I know it's hot out there, but we'll move on to red wines. So Peter, coming back to you, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go to Peter's Pinot Noir, and then since both of our winemakers have Syrahs, we're gonna do the Santa Barbara Syrah and the Napa Syrah side by side. So whichever wine you have, if you want to drink that, you can listen, but you'll see two different styles and how region and terroir affects that. But you want to just give a little talk about Pinot Noir, your Pinot?
Yeah, you know, Alison, to say a little talk about Pinot Noir is almost an oxymoron. It's hard to do that. Pinot Noir is just such an amazing grape to work with. It is very sensitive. It doesn't grow well in a lot of places. There are a few places in the world where it really does well. We're located about 10 miles from the ocean, whether you go straight west or straight south from here. And that is what gives us a proximity to the cold Pacific Ocean. If you go 10 miles east of here into the valley, there's no way you can go Pinot Noir here. And you go halfway to the ocean, it's too cold. But this little microclimatic area here in Santa Rita Hills is very good for Pinot Noir. It is a grape that's very sensitive. It is a grape with small clusters. It's a grape that leaves a lot of TLC during the growing season. But if you do things well, which we are learning all the time how we can do it better, then it's something that provides you with some amazing grapes to work with. This wine is a wine that we made with a combination of the 12 best barrels. So once a year, Rebecca and I, besides being
So
the
it's
farmers,
it's our barrel reserve. So all the best barrels go into this wine, but we only make about 250 cases of it. So it's a very small amount.
sorry about the dogs running around the back. I think they're having a lot of fun back there. What's done with this wine is, again, it's natural winemaking, native yeast fermentation. It ferments typically 8 to 12 days. We let it settle up to a month afterwards, what's called extended maceration, to get the optimal tannin extraction out of the skins. And then we rack it to barrels. And then the barrels, it will be spending, in this case, it spent 33 months in the barrels. We leave it in the barrels. We don't rack it in and out of the barrels along the way. We just leave it there. And then Rebecca and I and our system winemaker taste all the barrels blindly over 2 days. And out of 60 barrels, typically we select these 12 barrels for this wine.
And you don't typically see Pinot Noir being barrel aged for 3 years. And I was actually pouring at an event and I had a French guy next to me. And he kept hearing me tell people this and he kept saying, that's impossible. And I said, here, try it. And he tried it. He said, oh my God. But it's the difference because we don't rack, which means we're not introducing oxygen into the winemaking process, which is a way of artificially aging your wines. And therefore, we're having them stay in barrels longer to age more naturally is really the intent.
So again, small production of this. If those of you who have the bottle, in your hands, if you turn it around, you'll see on the back that's something we're very proud of, is that we actually do label ingredient listing. Can you see it like that? Does that come through like that? Okay, so we do ingredient listing here. We're very proud of doing very minimum amount of additions. It's basically just grapes farmed the right way, a little bit of oak, and then a tiny amount of sulfur that's added along the way.
And all of our reds are unfined, unfiltered as well, so we don't manipulate them that way either. And our Pinot Noir is 100% French oak. We put about 1/3 new French oak on the wines. We don't believe in over oaking our wines, kind of like over salting your food in our minds. And so,
besides that, it tastes pretty darn good.
And just FYI, Peter's the Pinot lover. I'm the Syrah lover. So the Syrah is what I'll be able to do.
Sure, but what pays the bills? Cheers out there, cheers.
Cheers. Well, I think, I don't know how familiar everyone is with Santa Barbara as a region, but it is a really unique region because it is the only transverse mountain range in North America. And what that means is that the mountains go east to west instead of north to south. So in from the ocean, you get this coolness that comes in, that ocean breeze, and you've got Santa Maria Valley and Santa Rita Hills closest to the ocean that are perfect for Pinot and Chard, the Burgundy varietals. And for every mile you go east, it gets a degree warmer. And by the time you're at the end of the San Ynez Valley, you're in Happy Canyon, where it's warm enough to do the Bordeaux varieties of Cabernet and Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc. And right in the middle of the valley is the Rhone area, which is the Syrah and Grenache area. That said, you can do cool climate Syrah, as they do in the Santa Rita Hills. So let's move on to Syrah. And again, Peter, briefly tell us about your Syrah, or Rebecca, tell us about your Syrah. And then we're gonna go over and learn about the Napa Syrah and have Wayne and Kara tell us about that.
I just have a hard time pouring my Pinot Noir. Can I just keep that one
You
now?
can keep it.
Okay, you talk about your Syrah then.
Okay, so like Allison said, our Syrah comes from Santa Rita Hills. It's a very cool weather Syrah. And if you want a little dinner party tip, you're drinking a Syrah, and if it only has the front palate and it does not have the middle or the back palate, that actually is an indication that it came from a warm climate. A cool climate Syrah will have all three palates. I actually call this my lip liquor.
You're a little biased in this, huh?
I'm a Syrah lover. I call this my lip liquor because that's what everybody does. So this Syrah is also barrel aged for 3 years, unfined, unfiltered, and we put both American and French oak on it. But what we like to do is, instead of having a barrel of French and a barrel of American and then combining them at bottling time, we buy hybrid barrels where the heads are American and the staves are French. And therefore, I like to say the 3 years the Americans and the French are duking it out until they get integrated.
Another thing about the wine is that the reason why we planted that single row of Viognier way back to 237 vines was that we were hoping that we sometimes could pick the Viognier together with the Syrah and do what's called, often referred to as a Côte Rôtie style, which they do in some of the regions in Northern Rhone, Côte Rôtie, Hermitage, where they can pick a little bit of Viognier, put in together with the Syrah to help with the co-fermentation, with color binding, with increasing flavors, etc. Some years we're able to pick them together, not all years, because sometimes the Viognier would ripen too soon. But this is an example where we had a little bit of Viognier that was in there fermenting together with it. The other parameter that we play with every year is stem inclusion. We don't have a formula for how much stem we include. So as we de-stem,
It's based on what we think tastes good.
we taste through the stem and sometimes decide to put the stems back into the fermenters.
And just a little, another tidbit is it's Santa Rita Hills. Yes, it's mostly Pinot and Chardonnay. And I believe there's 6 or 7 vineyards only that have Syrah planted. So there's not very much cool climate Syrah coming out of Santa Barbara.
And what about you, Wayne and Kara? Tell us a little bit about your Syrah and where it's sourced from. Is it from your vineyard?
It's from a vineyard, but over in Sonoma, on the Sonoma coast in the Fort Ross Seaview appellation.
Cool climate Syrah.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to go with this. It's a curious thing. It's very vintage variable. So some years, so when people think of Fort Ross Seaview, they think of Hirsch, Flowers, Marcusson. Some of the real ocean current affected cooler climate vineyards and producers out there. We're a few miles inland on King Ridge Road, and it can get hot. So it's a curiosity because we get that early morning fog influence, but there's been 1 or 2 seasons. You have to be very careful about when you pull your fruit. Technically speaking, yes, much cooler than the Napa Valley, but it can get hot on various days. So you have to be very careful towards the end of, when you're looking to pull the fruit, that you don't get overripe, which is, so again, technically cool climate for this region. We purchased the vineyard again with the intent of planting some Pinot and some Chardonnay out there. The Syrah was already planted. We pulled out some of it. We try and keep it as rustic as is warranted for the site. We really like the Rhone style Syrahs as well. You get all pepper on the nose, earth. We have done 100% whole cluster or destemmed as much as half of it, depending on the vintage. This particular vintage, the 16 that some of you have in front of you, is 100% whole cluster, foot stomped, and pressed off into about 40% new Hungarian oak. And the reason we use Hungarian oak is you need something, in our opinion, that holds up the spiciness of Hungarian barrels, lends another element to the wine. We don't leave it in barrel for quite 3 years. We're probably in barrel for about 2 years. But again, it maintains that rusticity, and we've done again as little as 100% neutral and 100% whole cluster. So depending on the vintage, we produce a little bit differently every year, but it still has those same attributes year over year, specifically the white pepper and the earth.
Really, both beautiful wines. It's great to taste them side by side, not to say one is better, because that's never the goal in wine. It's to understand which you would want to pair with what dish. And I would definitely start with that Ampelos. It's a little lighter style. The fruit's a little brighter, and you've got this nice kind of dark fruit and bramble note that comes out of it, but still with really great acidity. So it's making me really hungry. But I have a question for both of you. You both came out from New York, and obviously California became sort of that destination. What drew you specifically to the region that you're in? And, are you intrigued by any other regions sort of around you? So Wayne and Kara, what drew you to Napa Valley?
Initially, again, we had some friends here. We liked the lifestyle, and we were looking to just make some hobby wine, a few hundred cases a year. For choice, we really do like our vineyard out in Fort Ross Seaview. I think that's some very interesting areas, some very interesting production out there. But Occidental also, anything cooler climate generally suits us. When we purchased the Diamond Mountain Vineyard, we thought we would get that cooling influence, and it's hot up here. So again, I think for Cabernet, it's fine, but if we're going to continue with other varietals, some of these other appellations are more well suited to our taste profile.
So why don't you briefly just tell us about your Cabernet, and then we can talk a little bit more about, the areas as you're drawn to cool climates.
So the Cabernet is pretty straightforward in production methodology. Pump over. We use generally about 35% new French oak. We also do not like to over oak our wines. The differentiator for this wine are the soils. The soil up here is all volcanic. We were going to show you in the vineyard, but we can show you here. You can see it's all rhyolitic ash. So the vines struggle pretty hard up here. We don't get a lot of tonnage per acre. And again, it can get warm, and we don't introduce a lot of water into the vineyards. So we're looking for the vines to go as deep as they can to find nutrients and pull up, the surrounding area. There's a lot of redwoods around us. There's a lot of forest flora in the wine. Some minerality, we think, although that's something some people would dispute, comes from the rhyolitic ash, but we think that's present in it as well. It tends also to be a place where we have to be very careful about getting overripe. So we generally pull our fruit very early, generally about 23 and a half bricks. And we like what it produces. It's right up our alley. Whereas the first vineyard we started with on Hennessy Ridge, for people who like a fuller, more dense Cabernet, they seem to appreciate the small production we make from up there.
Really nice sandy tannins. It just is like nice sandpaper on the tongue. It's really, really, really tasty.
Yeah, the mountain is known for very fine tannins in the wines, for sure.
Good, I didn't make a mistake there. So Peter and Rebecca, you were not drawn to the very famous Napa Valley. What drew you to San Ynez Valley?
So, part of it was that as we met in the early 90s, we started going on wine tours together. I kind of grew up with wine in Denmark. Rebecca was very curious about learning about wines.
That's because I grew up in Alaska and we didn't have any.
Except for that darn milk wine.
Yeah, we did have maple.
So we went to Burgundy, Bordeaux, to Tuscany, Piedmont, and of course up to Napa, Sonoma. We lived in Los Angeles and Long Beach back then, and all those places were too far away. We could have gone to Temecula, but I kind of prefer the apples down there. Going up to Santa Barbara was just an amazing heaven to go to. It was only about a good 2-hour drive from where we lived back in LA.
But it's beautiful too.
But it's gorgeous, as you can see the mountains in our back here. The weather is ideal. There's a lot of wonderful people up here. There's some great food. And of course, we really, really love the wines. And the other thing that I thought was great, I came to the United States because I wanted to discover this kind of new frontier spirit. And I was back in the corporate America day, and I discovered that. And then getting into the wine industry, Santa Barbara is really one of the new up-and-coming places. And I love that newness. I love the way that we were initially just received with open arms.
The neat thing about Santa Barbara, unlike other AVAs, and it's a good news and it's bad news. The bad news about Santa Barbara is nobody knows Santa Barbara for their wines. You think Napa, you think Cab. You think Sonoma, you think, Pinot. Everyone has an identity. Santa Rita Hills, Pinot. Santa Barbara County, no wine comes to mind. And the reason is that every grape can grow here. And therefore, we were, besides the beauty of it, just was a trade because he wanted Pinot, I wanted Syrah. How do we find a place we can do both?
And you can experiment, and like Allison, you talked about that degree mile thing that we have here that you discovered many times. You've been up here, and that is very unique. And you can experiment up here, and because our weather is so reliable. We have Grenache planted right behind me. There's Grenache down the hill. That's the latest that ripens. We have years where we've been picking Grenache on the 30th of November, the day before December, and it ripens really well. So there are just a lot of opportunities here. It's still a lot of undiscovered territory, and that's what we love about Santa Barbara.
But I think the main reason why we picked Santa Barbara is we had no idea or was clueless about wines at that time, and we just found it was pretty.
No, we are good at drinking it. We were
good at drinking it, but we had no idea how to make it.
Well, I'm sure that you both are very familiar. I don't know if everyone else listening is familiar with the old adage of how do you make a small fortune in wine?
Okay, we're going to cut out now. Very nice seeing all of you.
You know, it's always interesting when people buy land and decide to retire into the wine industry. I'm going to ask both of you, as former corporate, or I guess, Wayne, you're still in the corporate world to a degree, but as former corporate people now working in the wine industry, do you work harder or do you work less than when you were in the corporate world?
Oh, that's funny.
How's retirement going?
Well, you know what? In the corporate world, I could have vacations and I had my Sundays off.
I have poison oak all over my body right now. And from not from my day job. So yeah, and I'm getting up in time for my day job because I'm itching from about 2 in the morning until things start up in the markets. It's a lot of work. You have to really enjoy it. I've been in the vineyard all day today. Kara is in the vineyard very frequently. I don't know if you could see when we were out there. We have some falcon kites hanging that are constantly getting tangled up to prevent bird strikes on the fruit and things like that. I mean, it's a constant chore. But it's not a chore. It's a labor of love, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So retirement is not
here.
It's not the word we would use.
And the common thing that you both have is you're both couples working together, and longevity, both married, like you're surviving shelter in place and a business together. Congratulations to both of you, to all of you.
So far.
But Alison, I would like to just add on to that yes, it is absolutely a labor of love. It is an incredibly rewarding job to be a farmer. So just to have that pleasure of working together with soil, work with plants, work with weather, Mother Nature, and just to see that there's this thing that Mother Nature gives you back, which are these awesome clusters that you bring out to the winery and do a little manipulation as little as possible, and one day you have a glass of wine in your hand. That to me is just so incredibly rewarding.
Actually, I gotta say, when I was in the corporate world, I was an executive. And every time I went to a dinner party and somebody said, "What do you do?" They go, "Oh, nice knowing you," and walk off. Now when I go to a dinner party and they ask me what I do, I say, "I make wine." Everybody wants to be your friend.
And I would also say in these days where we are becoming hopefully more and more conscious about the environment, about the climate, taking care of Mother Earth, it is very rewarding being a farmer where, although we only own a tiny little part of the earth right here, Rebecca and I have been working as farmers on turning this earth, turning this land, the topsoil, which is one of the most precious resources we have, turn it into be a better piece of earth than what we started with. And this whole thing that we have a tiny little job, but an important job in the world of curing and really providing better topsoil for the future, I think it's just awesome. And the fact we can make good wine of it is a really good extra benefit. So there's no job that I think really replaces the pleasure of what we are doing here.
Well, you're both making wonderful wines, really nice mouthfeel and beautiful acidity, food-friendly wines. So for everyone listening, if you're hungry now, now's the time to keep drinking and add some food if you haven't already. But I want to see if anyone has any questions. I mean, feel free to take yourself off mute, and if you have any comments or questions, join in.
I have a question for Kara.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Your husband is normally such a quiet, mild-mannered, very intelligent, well-spoken man about Wall Street. What's he like with a body full of poison oak?
I don't think you really want an honest answer, Lee. It's been a long couple weeks.
I will say it's not appropriate to try and remove poison oak in flip-flops and shorts. Lesson learned. Lesson learned. It won't happen again.
Actually, Wayne, I do have a question. So I got 2 bottles of Cab here. Lean Mouth Cab. We haven't even talked about your cabs yet. I got a 2015 and a 2016. You yourself said there's a noticeable difference between one versus the other. Can you tell everybody what it is?
The primary difference between the two is when we pick the fruit. 2015, we had some late year heat spikes, and we pulled the fruit. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Kathy Coruscant's wines. We're big fans. We were BC. We were before Kathy that year. And that's our claim to fame. We pulled the fruit on September 3rd. So we actually just had this discussion with the winemaker from Alpha Omega, and his response was both were ripe, but the 15 was more complex. So there's that, again, that fine point where you really don't want to get overripe. The 16 came in mid-September. It was a bit more temperate, but it is definitely more fruit, slightly higher alcohol, a bit of a different profile. The 15 is extremely lean and very, very high in tannin.
I'm going to be honest. I opened a bottle of 15 a couple weeks ago. It's fabulous.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lee.
Any other questions or comments or observations or?
I have a question for the couple from Hard Six. So you mentioned that you're coming out with the Chardonnay. So when is that going to happen, and in what style are you going to make that Chardonnay? And can I hear from Kara, please, because Wayne's spoken too much already.
Get back here. Well, we're still waiting for Sonoma County to approve the permit to plant the Chardonnay, so it's going to be a long wait. Unfortunately.
My guess is 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
We intended to have it fully producing by now. As with a lot of things in the wine business, we've had a few snafus out at the coast, and we are going to now start again with the permitting process. We have it in front of Sonoma County. The style would be extremely, I would say, Merceauin style would be our hope.
And so Wayne and Kara, you have your property on Diamond Mountain, and then you also have a property in Fort Ross, Seaview?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you're purchasing some fruit as needed based on what you're achieving.
The only thing we've purchased to date is a Sauvignon Blanc. Again,
Okay.
because we felt like we needed to offer a white that we like. We're not big fans of a lot of the Napa Cab. They tend to be very dense, very big, very over oaked. So our answer was a Sauvignon Blanc that has some attributes of a Chardonnay from around here. A lot of people confuse it for a Chardonnay, but still has more complex fruit, a little bit of minerality. And I think eventually the hope is to really have 3 or 4 varietals of things that we're particularly passionate about, which would be the coastal Syrah, the cool climate Syrah, Pinot from out there. That's a much harder thing to kind of figure out what we're going to do, because we have finite space for planting, and the clones are very, very important to Pinot production, less so for some of the other varietals. So that's gonna be a big decision-making process.
And we've been lucky with the Sauvignon Blanc because since our first Sauvignon Blanc, it's always been from the same vineyard in Southern Napa. So
Doesn't Auberge carry your Sauvignon Blanc?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't Auberge Soleil carry offer your Sauvignon Blanc?
Auberge has the Syrah.
Oh, they have the Syrah. Okay.
So you've got your 2 vineyards, and on your horizon is Chardonnay and developing that property. And then Peter and Rebecca, what do you have on your horizon? What's coming for you guys? Anything new?
Yeah, so speaking about Chardonnay first, back in 2016, we decided that we needed to see how we could leverage from other experiences. And speaking about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, who knows how to make that better than they do in Burgundy. So therefore, in 16, we started a joint venture with a great producer in Burgundy, Alex Gambal, and started making wine together with Alex. So we have been making Chardonnay with Alex since 16. We've also been making some Pinot.
But it's
since
under a
18.
different label, just to separate the brand.
Yeah, so that's a Gamble work label. And that's been great because that way we could tie into Alex, who's an American who's been in Burgundy for over 40 years. so we could tie into his knowledge from Burgundy. So that's been one of the exciting projects. The second thing is that we always like to experiment. So what we do here in the vineyard is just a constant set of experiments with clonal co-fermentations, growing the grapes together with Sorry, I just lost the camera here.
We have a lot of wind in Santa Rita Hills, and it's
sorry
its
about
usual time to kick up.
Okay, we should be back in business now. So we do, we grow like Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir together to do co-pigmentation, like I mentioned with Syrah and Viognier before.
That was an experiment we worked with Roger Bolton, who's a professor at UC Davis, and he specializes in co-pigmentation. And so we worked together with him because they discovered this because in France, they added the VNA to the Syrah because the VNA would have more sugar than what the, oh, I'm looking, the VNA will have more sugar than the Syrah to help them do better in their fermentation. And they found that the white grapes could extract more out of the skins than the red grapes could do for themselves. So we've been working with UC Davis on doing a co-pigmentation with Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris.
And then the new thing that we are doing right now is a few years ago, we were in Priorat in Spain, and we totally fell in love with Carignan. So we've been making Carignan for a couple of years now with grapes that we actually purchase. And we may be getting into some Carignan Grenache co-fermentation to really emulate the Priorat wines. Ultimately, I mean, we're both in love with Greek wines. Some Tirtico, some Ayottico or something, but I mean, we're still so darn young, to forget about my gray hair, that we believe that this is a great place in the world for ongoing experimentation. We can do that here because this is the United States. So that's how it will continue to be, ongoing experimentations.
Well, I look forward to trying your, well, if you ever do Greek varieties, but I look forward to trying your Carignan. I'm a big fan of that grape. Before we wrap up, there was a question. I know that labels obviously are very attractive, and Wayne and Kara, if you could talk a little bit about the inspiration between the artwork, because every label you have has a different piece of art on it. And I don't know if you can just kind of talk about sort of the inspirations of how you do your labels.
So we have a few friends. The label on the Cabernet and the Sauvignon Blanc is an artist named Nancy Grossman.
And George has a great picture of it up
Oh,
there.
George, if you could see behind George Madrigal on the screen there, he's got all three of them going. There were a few ways that this quote unquote retirement could have gone. And one was to be involved in the art market in New York or move out here. So what better way to kind of meld the two than to have incredible labels by artists you're passionate about. And we're actually, Nancy, in return for using those labels, gets a case of wine a year and sends us a lovely letter every year thanking us for getting her drunk. She is the epitome of outside art from the 70s and 80s in Manhattan, world-renowned, lovely, lovely woman. The other is the Syrah label is a Bay Area artist who passed in the early 90s named Jay DeFeo, who were very, we collect a lot of her work as well. And the DeFeo Trust allows us to use it. It was a bit of a stretch. They wanted to try the wine first to make sure it was up to their standards before they allowed us to use the label. But every label, we hope, has some of the piece of art has some of the qualities of the wine as well. So with the mean mouth, for instance, the fine tannins, you know, the Cabernet, it has that more aggressive nature to it. The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, if you go out to the coast in Fort Ross Seaview in the middle of nowhere, all you can see is a Buddhist temple off in the distance, and the seated cloud, again, eventually for the Chardonnay, now for the Sauvignon Blanc, has that ethereal, feel to it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. If there's nothing else, I'm going to take a second and thank Wayne and Kara, and I'm going to thank Peter and Rebecca for joining us, and I'm going to thank you guys for joining us for this hour. If you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to jump on in. But otherwise, we thank you for joining us on Sunday, supporting Go Campaign, Vintage Hollywood, and hopefully we'll see you next year at Vintage Hollywood.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.